From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
Yeah, thanks, Ollie. Thank you. Thursday's programme, it's just you and me today. Although there's no shortage of things to talk about. You better believe it. I'm Richie Allen. Welcome to Thursday's show. Tweet me as usual. You know how to do that. It's lovely. It's always lovely to be with you. It's a dark and damp evening here in Salford, in Greater Manchester, the great city of Salford. This is your Richie Allen radio show.
It's the Richie Allen Show. Broadcasting live on richieallen.co.uk and multiple platforms around the world. And now, here's your host, Richie Allen.
I love the 80s. I love the 80s. A child of the 70s, but I grew up in the 80s. The Russ Abbott Madhouse Show. Les Dennis, Bella Emberg. God be with the days. That's what I say anyway. How's everything in your world? You can tell me, of course, online. I'll read it out. Good evening. I'm going to run through the big stories of the day, the last couple of days. We'll put a different slant on the coverage, on the opinions, and you can, as I said, you can have your own say, and I'll read out your tweets as they come in. 4.5 minutes past the hour. Yes, indeed. Get rid of the theme tune. Hey, let me tell you. A few years ago, it occurred to me that I was being sent advertisements online that were kind of very familiar to me. And I thought, I'm getting products sent to me online. Well, I'm getting ads anyway. And I'm pretty sure that I have been thinking about those products. And then I thought, maybe I've been speaking about those products. And then I was having a chat with the late, truly great Jim Mars. Rest in peace. And I said, come here, Jim, you spend a lot of time online. And what do you think of this notion that the microphones on our devices, our phones, and our other devices, our laptops and our computers, might be, well, somebody might be eavesdropping on us? And Jim said, you better believe it, Richie. I mentioned the same thing to David Icke, and he said, you better believe it, Richie. He said, of course they are. Funny one today. I went on YouTube today to watch a video, something that was on RT. And most big organisations, big media organisations, they do place ads on their videos on YouTube through Google even, AdSense. And today, every time I turned a video on, I was sent an ad for training puppies. Right? For training puppies. Now, I can say, I swear to God and Sonny Jesus, I have not gone online and searched for information about training puppies. Because while I would never class myself as an expert, I wouldn't be so arrogant or pretentious. I've had a lot of experience with dogs and I've picked up a few things over the years. I don't need to spend money with somebody to teach me the obvious, the bleeding obvious. So I've not done any of that. And I've got to conclude that it's talking about puppies. And I've got to conclude that it might be talking about puppies on this programme or even on the live stream this morning. Now I'm getting bombarded with ads. Now I am being bombarded because every time I open a YouTube video now, it's an ad for puppy training. You imagine it? Yes, strange times, eh? Strange times indeed. It's only the beginning, of course. Yeah. As we, I suppose, more and more of us start using the voice-controlled programs like Alexa. Who's listening in? And of course they've admitted that they listen into Alexa, of course. So yeah, I'm talking about puppies and the new addition to our household. And hey presto, I'm getting ads, not just on Google YouTube, but I've also noticed one attached to an email that I received. Yeah. Because Microsoft, Hotmail, you get ads now when you open your emails. At the side of your emails, you get them. And I've had another one about products for puppies. Isn't it incredible? No, it isn't. We know what's going on. Oh, yeah. Let's have a chat then. David Attenborough is still alive. He is indeed. The man whom I suppose in this part of the world anyway, a bit of a national treasure. Grew up in Ireland, and because in Waterford City we got the BBC, we got BBC Wales and BBC Two Wales, we kind of grew up with David. And my primary school, St. Saviour's National School in Ballybeg, they loved the man. So way back when, they would have gotten the videotapes, the video cassettes from the BBC, bought them and showed them in the classroom. So we kind of loved David Attenborough's programmes growing up. Well, these days he's spending more time talking about climate change than meerkats. I prefer David Attenborough when he was talking about meerkats and monitor lizards and those lizards that kill you. What are they called? Those Komodo dragons. Yeah. I love those programmes. But he said the moment of crisis has come. We have been putting things off for year after year. It's time to act now, says David Attenborough. He said this in a BBC News interview because the BBC is launching a year of special coverage on the subject of climate change, because the BBC has decreed that there isn't a debate anymore, that catastrophic climate change is real. We know this because a friend of mine who listens to this programme and who has worked at the BBC for some years sent me a directive, sent me an email that was sent around to all the BBC editorial departments last year or the year before, maybe 2018, saying you don't have to get balance anymore. The subject is closed. Climate change is real. So the BBC now, like Sky News, this is campaigning journalism, which is an oxymoron. Journalists can't campaign. The journalist should be an observer and try to determine what is true and what isn't true. And to determine that, you've got to speak to everybody. Not just the people who say, yes, it is real. You've also got to speak to others. That's how you do it. That's journalism. Campaigning journalism. So the BBC, a year of special coverage on a subject of climate change. And they're talking about the Australian fires. And David Attenborough said, it's palpable nonsense for politicians and commentators to suggest that the Australian fires were nothing to do with the warming world. We know perfectly well, he said, that human activity is behind the heating of the planet. Well, I don't know that perfectly well. Here he is, David Attenborough, or Sir David, if you please.
We have been putting things off year after year. We've been raising targets and saying, oh, well, if we do it within the next 20 years, or if we do it... The moment of crisis has come. We can no longer prevaricate. We can't go on saying, but there is hope and we'll leave it to next year. We have to change, and we have to change not by appeals to different kinds of optimism, but to deliberate, compelling life or death decisions. Where on the bigger scale are these decisions needed to come next? Answer, China. If the Chinese come and say, not because we are worried about the world, but for our own reasons, we are going to take major steps to curb our carbon output, because
the major steps I think he's referring to, I think they want us to live like we lived back in the Stone Age. They want us to go back to caveman living, right? No point in labouring that point. I think you know that.
Because our climate is changing.
It's changing. It's been changing for millions of years, David.
We are going to do it. Everybody else would fall into line, one thinks. That would...
Keep in mind what he said there. Everybody else will fall into line.
That would be the big change that one could hope would happen. There has been a huge change in public opinion. People can see the problem, particularly young people can see.
Well, young people, because they have terrorised the bejesus out of the young, haven't they? Giving them nightmares, right?
See the problem, and that must force governments to take action. We have to realise that this is not playing games. This is not just having nice little debates and
playing games. He is sloganeering there. This knight of the realm, this intelligent man who has brought us some of the best natural world photography and commentary of all time. Let's give him a little bit of credit here. But he's sloganeering here. He's not talking in terms of evidence. He's just sloganeering, isn't he? Listen.
Debates and arguments and then coming away with a compromise. This is an urgent problem that has to be solved.
That's the slogan.
And what is more, we know how to do it. That's the paradoxical thing, that we're refusing to take steps that we know have to be taken. And every year that passes makes those steps more and more difficult to achieve.
And that's the slogan as well, sadly. Bit sad, that, isn't it? I'll tell you why it's a bit sad, because a part of me wonders if David Attenborough actually believes it. Think of David Bellamy, God love him. I wonder if Attenborough actually believes it. I wonder if his heart is really in it. Well, I don't know. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. On that subject, by the way, Jean Ann has been in touch about Google advertising. She sent me a very interesting post. I'll read it to you in a second. You know, it has been said in recent years that in the future, wars will be fought over water. Now, I know you've heard that. It's not new to you. It made sense to me that when I heard it first, I suppose I heard it first in the 1990s. You know, future wars will be fought over water. It sounded very powerful. And I thought, yeah, why not? Yeah, why not? But I'm thinking future wars may well be fought over climate change. You know, that sounds like a bit of a stretch. Oh, the BBG now with this bollocks. No. Hear me out. We might be fighting wars in the future over climate change. A stretch? Maybe. I'm going to play a little snippet of something I've played for you before. And it's the chairman of the Council on Foreign Relations, which is a round table group, Rockefeller. You have to know this stuff. Let's give a bit of credit to David Icke, because he's written extensively about these groups and where they came from. And it is vital information that most people, first of all, have never heard. And even if they did, they wouldn't believe it. Got to find out about these groups and their origins. So it's very, very important, the Council on Foreign Relations. The chairman is a guy called Richard Haas. And I've played you some of this clip, I think, on about 4 occasions in the last 3 years. He's talking here about World Order 2.0. In the past, he says, it was right that we respected sovereign states' boundaries. And it was right that it was right that we didn't invade sovereign states willy-nilly. That was the right thing. But that's no longer acceptable in the globalist world, he says. I want you to listen in case you've forgotten this, and you should be sharing this stuff. This whole speech by Richard Haas is available on YouTube. Here's the prescient bit of that speech, the salient bit. Richard Haas: one time sovereign states should be left alone, and invading them was wrong, even though it did happen. But not in the globalist world, he says, Richard Haas.
That if you live in a world of globalization, to make a long story short, nothing stays local for long. If you have computer hackers on your territory, they can cause mischief or worse all over the world. If you have a poultry farm that has unsanitary conditions, certain types of diseases can break out, human transmission, it can cause a global pandemic. If you're India and you decide that your economy forces you to generate a lot more electricity, and the easiest way to do it is through coal, this will have climate change consequences for everyone else.
Wow. You got that bit, didn't you? I know I've played this for you before. Some will remember, some won't.
This will have climate change consequences for everyone else.
Can't have that. So if India decides we need a lot more energy than we're able to produce at the moment, let's use our coal. Well, that's going to have climate change consequences. We can't have that.
In the world, in addition to whatever environmental consequences it may have for you. As we learned on 9/11, a few blocks from here, if a government allows, or one way or another, through choice or weakness, terrorists operate out of its territory, those terrorists can cause havoc halfway around the world. As we saw in Syria, if you have massive flows of refugees, it can destabilize other parts of the world, as we're now seeing in Europe. So my argument is simply, while we need to respect sovereignty and not, again, bring about a world where invasion is commonplace, we also now need to build on it. And my idea is that sovereign entities need to have the obligation to make sure that nothing is allowed to go on within their territorial limits that has adverse consequences for anybody else.
This is the essence of one world government planning. It's what he's advocating. and he isn't anybody, and most people will have never heard of Richard Haas. They should do, because he's more powerful than Donald Trump. Don't laugh. He is. These guys are the capo regimes of the dons who run the financial institutions of the world. They're the capos. They're the captains. They take the dictates, what is dictated to them by the financial ruling elites, and they bring it to the politicians locally and nationally, and they say, this is how it's going to be. One world government. A set of rules that every country must obey or face the consequences. That was back in 2017. 18 minutes. Just before we move on to impeachment and Donald Trump, Jean Ann was on to me to say about, I mentioned earlier on, getting ads for puppies and puppy training, which to me is, it's pretty obvious then that when we're speaking and talking amongst ourselves, maybe programs, maybe it isn't a human being, but programs, is it artificial intelligence? I don't know, are listening through our devices' microphones. I've no doubt about that. Because I've not been searching online about puppies. I haven't been. As I said, I've no reason to do that. Jean Ann says, Richie, I had precisely the same experience when I was dealing with my mother's death. Everywhere on Facebook and in Google, they were sending adverts, obviously based on cue words between my sister and myself, re the mother's care. No hiding place A. So this actually predated Jean Ann's mother passing away. Chatting with her sister was Jean Ann, and then she was coming across these adverts on Facebook and everywhere else. Imagine. Wow. Yeah, where does it all end? So privacy then, I mean, I suppose we wouldn't claim, or we wouldn't be stupid enough to think that privacy is something that we can achieve or attain, or privacy is something we enjoy. I suppose privacy is dead now. And if you wanted any proof of it, there it is. 20 minutes past the hour. Let's move on and talk briefly about Donald Trump and impeachment. Very briefly. The BBC reports in the last couple of hours that the Government Accountability Office has claimed that the White House broke the law by withholding aid to Ukraine that had been approved by Congress. So the Government Accountability Office is a watchdog. They've said today the White House broke the law by withholding that aid which had been approved by Congress. Trump is accused of freezing aid to pressure Ukraine to investigate Joe Biden and Joe Biden's son. So Ukraine itself has opened an investigation on separate allegations linked to the impeachment. And here's an interesting thing. Rudy Giuliani is one of Donald Trump's lawyers, and he's got an aide, a guy called Lev Parnas. And Parnas told NBC that he was in Ukraine to put pressure on officials to investigate Biden and his son Hunter on behalf of Trump and Giuliani. I think Lev Parnas gave an interview to Rachel Maddow, didn't he? Might be MSNBC, maybe I'm wrong. So Lev Parnas, an aide to Giuliani, says, yes, I was in Ukraine. Yes, I was there to put pressure on officials to investigate Biden and his son. He said President Trump knew exactly what was going on. I wouldn't do anything without the consent of Giuliani or the president. Why would President Zelensky's inner circle or all of these people meet with me, including former President Poroshenko? They were told to meet with me, says Mr. Parnas. And that's the secret that they're trying to keep. I was on the ground doing the work of Donald Trump. Here's Sky News' Cordelia Lynch with the latest. Apparently, the White House has attacked Lev Parnas, well, because he's under indictment as well. Who isn't? Cordelia Lynch.
That's right, and they've been pretty robust in their defence, suggesting that Lev Parnas is simply not a credible or reliable witness. He is under indictment, and certainly there have been questions about whether or not he can be believed. Let me share with you now a statement from Stephanie Grisham. She's the White House press secretary. In it, she said, These allegations are being made by a man who is currently out on bail for federal crimes and is desperate to reduce his exposure to prison. The facts haven't changed. The president did nothing wrong. And this impeachment, which was manufactured and carried out by the Democrats, has been a sham from the start. Stephanie Grisham there echoing the sentiment of the president that we heard yesterday. They have from the very beginning cast this as a hoax. Nevertheless, Lev Parnas's interview is an explosive one. He incriminates Donald Trump, the vice president, Mike Pence, suggesting these senior people were all aware of exactly what he and others, namely the president's personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, were doing in Ukraine, and that they were part of a pressure campaign, something the president has always denied. It's not just him in terms of newsworthy developments on these impeachment issues that have emerged, but also this morning the Government Accountability Office has ruled that they broke the law, the Trump administration, by withholding aid from Ukraine. Two hugely significant moments, but will they make any difference to the Republican senators that will be sitting through that trial? At the moment, there is no suggestion that they will.
No, there isn't. There isn't any suggestion that this will progress ultimately to the end. Whatever Nancy Pelosi says, I believe it's theatre, darling, theatre. But what the hell do I know? I wonder if the cabal, here's one for you, put this in your pipe and smoke it for a bit and tell me how it tastes. I wonder if the cabal is planning to replace Donald Trump. I wonder. To stoke the fire. Remember, we're dealing with entities here that exert a control over humanity that most people can't even begin to imagine. And they can do whatever they want. They ultimately do not care who sits on the throne. I've said this a million times, because they control all of them. It means nothing to them, right? I wonder if they're planning to replace Donald Trump just to stoke the fires in the United States, to create the carnage. Because Trump's supporters worship him with an almost evangelical fervour, don't they? He can do no wrong, this guy. Doesn't matter that he broke every single pledge he made when he was running for praise. They worship him. They love him. It's scary. Think Damien Thorne, Sam Neill in The Omen 3, addressing the people on the island, and they're all standing there glassy-eyed. Trump supporters are a bit like that. Doesn't matter what he does, they believe him. They believe that he's this anti-deep state operative, this secret agent. It's horseshit, but they buy it. So if you wanted to create tension that might boil over into civil unrest, violence, riots, right, which is the problem, which would then get a reaction from, most ordinary people. We need to be protected from that. And then you can provide the solution. Martial law. The continued hyper-militarization of the police. What I would do is I would replace Trump and make it look like Trump was hard done by. Replace him, but make it look like he was stitched up, and then watch the carnage. Do you have any sympathy with that point of view? Or am I talking through my rectum? Which I do quite a bit, to be honest. Let's be clear about it. I wonder. Good evening to you. Good evening. It's good to be with you. It really is. Base Ninja says, on the listening in thing, it's beyond scary. Yet we are the tinfoil hat wearing crowd. How many people now realise that they, Google, etc., are listening in? I'll tell you what, Base Ninja, my friend, I'm guessing it's probably more than we think. David tweets, I was having a conversation about Clint Eastwood, and we wondered if Clint had gotten to 90. So out came the phone. I put just a C into the search engine, and lo and behold, which was the first suggestion? Yes, it was Clint Eastwood, says David. You're dealing with very sophisticated programs here, right? Because I am a little bit naive sometimes. I used to think that there's agents, like human agents, people listening to the microphones on our smartphones. I am a bit naive like that sometimes. So a couple of years ago, I imagined that you had call centres full of people listening in. But of course not. It's all done by very, very sophisticated programs. Yeah. Dystopia. Welcome to dystopia. Lovely stuff. Lorraine says, check out Primary Water by Deborah Tavares. StopTheCrime.net. Thanks, Lorraine. I appreciate that. I am familiar with Deborah's work, of course. I like Deborah. She's been on the programme a few times. Alan Badger says Greta or her dad wants climate deniers wiped from Facebook because they are undemocratic and because they disagree with her. Is that right, Alan? I don't spend any time on Facebook anymore. I got off it a couple of years ago. Hi to John Stott. John says, Richie, isn't Attenborough, as in David Attenborough, isn't he an advocate of depopulation as well? John, I can't answer that. I don't know, mate. So if you know, if there's any link to either a bit of audio or a bit of text where Attenborough is an advocate of, and he might be, it makes sense actually, do send it to me and I will certainly share it around. Hi to Julie Waters, hi to Gail, hi to Jason, how you doing? Hi Liz Jones. Lovely. 29 minutes past the hour. Shall we move on or shall we have a tune? Tell you what, before we do anything else, have a listen to this.
Renowned healer Mark Bayersky travels the world to find the most unique and powerful crystals for self-healing. Since the ancient times, crystals have been used as healing tools. They hold a natural healing vibration and are highly charged in positive energy. Mark teaches how to channel the universal energy and transfer it to the crystal to activate its healing power. Each crystal is used for its unique ability to target a different physical or emotional challenge. Mark Bayersky is an author, healer, speaker, and founder of the Pure Energy Healing Academy. He shares powerful messages of inspiration and healing on his daily YouTube videos, reaching millions worldwide. Mark's crystals, healing oils, and incense sticks are most sought after by other healers. His collection is available online at www.markbayersky.com. His work is presented through Lemon House, a company that creates and curates consciously made gifts.
Richie Allen.
Welcome back. I've no idea how long I'll be with you today. It's going to be beyond 6 o'clock anyway. It's just me and you today. Been a packed old week, hasn't it? And last week as well. It's been nice to be back. I'm full of energy, full of piss and vinegar. Piss and vinegar I am. Full of piss sometimes and the other stuff as well. We agree. You and I got thick skin. Right, a tune. I need a break. Here's The Boss. This is my favourite album of last year. It's Bruce Springsteen. An album called Western Stars. This is lovely. I love this. The genius that is Bruce, the Boss Springsteen. Hello, sunshine from Western Stars on the Richie Allen Radio Show. Yeah, it's very good stuff. Hey, Tom, did you hear that Max Egan thinks the world is flat? Did you hear that, Tom? Did you?
No. Could you repeat it? Because I can't believe my fucking ears.
Neither can I. Apparently, Max has said in a video the world is flat. Listen, I'm joking, by the way. None of that interests me. Max is very well known in independent media circles and has a YouTube channel with hundreds of thousands of subscribers. He's a lovely bloke. I've known him since TPV Television in London, and I found him very interesting, very knowledgeable, and I love hearing from him when he's on the radio programme. And he's caused a bit of a stir with a video that he put out yesterday. I'm wondering, is it tongue-in-cheek? I don't know. I haven't watched it yet. But I will acknowledge that some of you are asking me, what do I think of it? And I wouldn't ignore you. Of course I wouldn't. I haven't seen it, really. And ultimately, it really doesn't matter what I think of it. It matters what you think of it, not what I think of it. All righty, I said. Hey, I had an interesting tweet there. Charlotte says, I typed the word don't in after talking about don't fuck with cats on Netflix, and it came up as the first option. That's a private conversation, Charlotte, isn't it? Isn't it? Yes. It's about the Clint Eastwood thing that David said. It's about us being listened to by our devices. Mark Wilde says, I wish the earth was flat so they would shut up about it. Indeed. Faisal says it's interesting that Google doesn't serve up any mainstream media results on that. There should be loads. This is on the David Attenborough thing. John got back to me because I asked, is there an article that talks about David Attenborough where Attenborough says we need to depopulate or we need to reduce the population? Thanks. And John did send me a link, but I would prefer a mainstream media link, if you understand. And you understand why. I'm not saying that populationmatters.org is lying. I'm not saying that at all. But when you share it around, you know, to the perplexed might be more inclined to pay attention to it if it comes from the BBC or the Guardian or whatever. So thanks for your tweets. Let me read one or two more of them, and then we're going back to the news at 23 minutes to the top of the hour. Indeedy. Let's move on down there. Let's move on down because I missed out on one or two. Yes, Chris Morell. How you doing, Chris? Richie, I was using Flickr maybe 20 years ago now, along with MySpace. It was sort of the first social network. My avatar picture had me wearing an old Fila hat. This generated a link to the Fila website, says Chris. I liked that. How interesting, Chris. Wow. That the companies back then could use photographs of people wearing their material and then hyperlink your photograph of you with your hat to their website. Very, very interesting. Thanks for that, Chris. I really appreciate that. Paul Curtis, how you doing, Paul? Of Paul Curtis Tours. Paul phoned in the radio show, didn't he, recently? Had a very interesting conversation with Paul. Richie, he said, I was asked to do a tour for some Swedish people. I was brushing up on my Swedish. Apart from ABBA and IKEA, what had Sweden given us? Facebook and Twitter were full of Visit Sweden adverts for weeks after that. Yes. Faisal has sent me a YouTube video where David Attenborough is talking about overpopulation. Thank you, Faisal. I've retweeted that this instant. Thank you very much. And thanks again. There's more from the BBC as well. Hi to JT the game. Right, let's move on because it's important. Priti Patel. Priti, Priti Patel. Zionist-controlled Priti Patel. Why do you say that, Richie? It's just, why? Well, because when Priti was the International Development Secretary, she took her holidays, went to Israel, didn't inform the government, and had meetings with senior Israeli government officials, and didn't tell her Prime Minister. She's a traitor. Right? Right, you can't do that. Can't be meeting with members of a foreign government without your bosses knowing about it. She got away with it. Well, she had to resign, but she's back. She's the Home Secretary. She is considering making it a criminal offence to be looking at extremist material online. If the government deems something to be extremist and you're looking at it online or you download it to your phone or whatever, you can face criminal proceedings. This is no joke. RT.com, RT Television is all over this. Here's counter-terror researcher Rob Four Walker. That's his name, F-A-U-R-E. Rob Four Walker, or Foray Walker. He's an academic, and he's not happy about this at all. Listen to him.
As the former independent reviewer of counter-terrorism legislation, Max Hill QC, has made quite clear, we don't need any more counter-terrorism legislation. As if the existing criminal law was employed correctly, it would be adequate to keep us safe. And I just want to give you one specific example of that. Usman Khan, who tragically murdered Saskia Jones and Jack Merritt in November last year, should have had a parole board hearing before being released. This didn't happen. And in response to this, Nazir Afzal, the former chief prosecutor, stated that austerity has broken the criminal justice system. Nick Hardwick, the former head of the parole board, said in the wake of these murders that cuts under austerity had made it less easy for the parole board to keep us safe. And Michael Mansfield QC has pointed out that the government's own recommendation from 2016 that each prisoner should have a dedicated prison officer to assess them for parole has not been implemented because of austerity. So the suggestion that we should introduce new legislation without having made any effort to ensure the existing law is applied is unquestionably populist posturing.
Good man, Rob. Good man. It's absolutely shocking. I mean, I often talk about this with my close friends. My friends, I mentioned them on the radio show. We talk about it. Orwell wouldn't be spinning in his grave. Orwell would be applauding this. Wouldn't he? He'd be like, absolutely brilliant. Christ, I wish I'd have thought of that. Fantastic. You can be arrested because you looked at liveleak.com, which is a great website. You could have been, I don't know, you could be anywhere. You could be looking at stuff put out there by ISIS or by another terrorist group, Al-Shabaab. And you could be reading it. You're an ordinary person. You're not a terrorist, but you're looking at what they're putting out there. And, well, you could be arrested. Tell you who thinks it's a good idea. David Lowe. He's an extremism expert. He thinks Priti Patel's ideas are needed. We need to criminalise reading and watching materials which have been deemed as extremist. This is scary shit, this. Here's David Lowe.
Well, I think you've got to look at it this way. If you look at child pornography, it's an offence just to download this material, and some that is pretty, horrific in itself. And I think what we're talking about, and as you're introducing the news story there, Bill, we're talking about really offensive, violent images that the likes of Cram Butt had on his phone prior to the London Bridge and Borough Market attack in 2017. So we're not talking about extremist material per se, because...
Yeah, so this dickhead had extremist material on his phone and he went on to commit a terrorist atrocity. Right. So, that means that nobody can look at this stuff. Nobody. Not independent journalists who want to see what's really happening. Not interested observers in academia. Nobody. Because you said a man killed some people on London Bridge and we found a video on his website. Excuse me, we found a video on his phone. Yeah. This has echoes of video nasties, doesn't it? Do you remember the big furore, the big ballyhoo, that's a great word, ballyhoo, about video nasties, about I spit on your grave and the driller killer. Do you remember? This is mad stuff.
Because we have to be very careful. We need to get that boundary right where extremist content that doesn't glorify or promote violence should come in with the legal boundaries of freedom of expression. I think that's important. What we're looking at is something that's really horrific. Where you're looking at beheadings, torture, individuals being burnt alive. And, it's not just about Islamist-inspired extremism.
Right, but I wouldn't look at those videos full stop because they're fucking disgusting. But I'm an independent journalist. And I know that ISIS is a creation of the British, French, Saudis and the Zionist state of Israel. ISIS is a creation of the West. I might have to hold my stomach and look at videos from time to time to try and analyse what's really going on. And you're saying if I'm doing that, I should be criminalised for it. Wow.
Extremism. We're talking about neo-Nazi, the extreme far right. The images that they give, which as regards the anti-Semitic, racist, and so on, where we're looking at violence being imposed on people. I think it should be an offence simply just to download this. The closest we've got now is to
should be an offence simply to download it. I might want to know what's going on in far right circles, so I might go on to one of their websites and start downloading some of their stuff. I can't do that. We've deemed that this material is, well, the material itself is beyond the pale, therefore you can't see it nor anybody else. And if you do look at it, you're committing a crime. Imagine. Visited by the old bill, for watching footage of a terror attack. So some arsehole goes out there with a rifle. Maybe he goes to a mosque, maybe he goes to a synagogue, maybe he goes to a church. And he starts firing at people. And he films it in GoPro. And if you're found later on to be looking at that, because you might want to see, is there anything in there that maybe has been missed by the authorities? Well, you're committing a crime. Do you see where that ends up? You know where that goes? government takes it upon itself to tell you what is extremist and what isn't. What is freedom of expression and what is harmful. And if you look at what's harmful or what's extremist, we're coming for you. And what this is really about, believe me, it's about destroying the independent media. Nothing else. It's the only reason they're doing it. I told you 2020 would be massive. Didn't I? What they would do this year to destroy any opposition to it, no matter how small. You know, we don't claim on this programme, you know, that we're reaching, you know, the numbers of people that the BBC does or Sky does. But there are lots and lots of programmes that are well produced and well presented. And they don't want that. They don't want us analysing that which they tell us to be true. A guy stabbed people on London Bridge and killed 2 people. And he was tackled by Lucas the Hero and a few people from an anti-extremism conference that was going on. You have to believe it. Even though we can see a video clearly of a man running away from the body of the terrorist and discarding a handkerchief. We want to know why he did that. We want to know who he is. Turns out he was a transport police officer. What a coincidence. But they don't want us asking questions like this or pointing out these anomalies. So now let's introduce a bill that says viewing this material online is equivalent to a crime. Oh yeah! Welcome to dystopia. I'll be back in about 15 seconds time. Don't go anywhere. This is the Richie Allen Radio Show for Thursday, 16th of January 2020.
The Richie Allen Show relies on your support. Go to richieallen.co.uk and set up a monthly donation today.
And by the way, it's Thursday, so it's the big show for Graham Booth and Hayden Hewitt, triggerwarning.tv, usually about 10 o'clock this evening. That's Trigger Warning on YouTube, triggerwarning.tv, the website. It's the 2 lads and sometimes a cast of others debating the stories that are making the headlines in UK and world news today. Hayden and Graham, triggerwarning.tv. William in Scotland says, Richie, this is 1984 on steroids. Of course it is. You don't have a right to examine stuff that is put in the public domain by people we have deemed persona non grata. If we say that somebody or something is persona non grata, you better not look at their material. If you do, you'll be prosecuted. Yeah. Oh yeah. Let's move on. Let's move on, be jeepers. Should politicians be prosecuted for lying? Should it be legislated for? Imagine a politician in court at the Old Bailey for a lie told by him or her on the campaign trail. Bizarrely, the leader of Plaid Cymru, Adam Price, Welsh politics, Welsh party, Plaid Cymru, Adam Price wants to make this happen, wants to make it law, that if a politician can be proven to have lied, he or she should end up in court. This is hilarious. He was on Good Morning Britain this morning with George Galloway. Yes, Galloway. You'll hear Galloway first, because Galloway disagrees with Adam Price. It's a little interesting, this.
One man's lie is another man's terminological inexactitude. It's another
That's a great
terminological inexactitude, darling.
bit of
that was
jargon.
Mr. Churchill, which shows how long this issue goes back. It's another man's economy with the actuality.
Or it's another man's propaganda or woman's propaganda.
Yeah, and politics is about that. I just think it's a big mistake to bring the law into politics. It would be terrific for lawyers. It would lead to a bonanza of cases. But who will guard the guards? Judges are drawn from the narrowest possible strata of society. You don't elect them and you cannot remove them. Politicians, hopefully, from a wider strata, and they are elected, and they can be removed.
As you well know, I mean, the consequences of tolerating a situation where, you know, those who lead us can mislead us, right, and get away with it with impunity are very, very grave indeed. I mean, in the case of Iraq, of course, you know, we're talking of people's lives are at stake when we're talking about, you know, peace or war. So, yes, okay, political lying is nothing new, but it's become an epidemic recently, isn't it? I mean, the Washington Post on the other side of the Atlantic, they calculated recently since President Trump became president, he's lied 15 times a day, over 15,000 cases.
That's fewer than the Washington Post.
You
see, the Washington Post.
Is that the truth, or are they telling a lie?
Well, see where we get to.
Well, shall we have a look? Shall we have a look at some stated political facts that other people would say are lies? I mean,
she's a bit silly here. We won't hear any more of this because she introduces the example of the £350 million a week for the NHS. That's not a good example. The previous example was a very good example. I think it's preposterous to suggest arresting politicians and prosecuting them for lying, because they lie every time they open their mouths. There'd be nobody in any parliament in any country in the world. They'd all be arrested. But Price made a good point when he talked about Blair and Iraq. Blair should be hanging from his ankles as we speak. In Belmarsh, he should be entering his second decade of confinement in solitary, hanging by his ankles, like the guy in The Life of Brian. You know, but stuff about figures and money, and if we leave the European Union, that's all conjecture. Sure, Boris Johnson was talking through his arse, of course he was. You know, but it doesn't mean that it couldn't have been done. Oh, yeah. My friend John Parsons, how you doing, John? This is very interesting. He says RTE, that's Radio Telefischer, it's the Irish national broadcaster, issued a warning before playing audio of Justin Barrett because they deemed him far right. And all that Barrett was doing was asking if locals had the right to say no to a direct provision centre. Imagine, John. And if John Parsons is telling me that, it's true. He saw that. They gave a trigger warning before playing a soundbite from a man they declared to be far right. And all the man was doing was asking if local people in local towns had the right to say no, we don't want a direct provision centre for refugees or for immigrants in our town. Maybe they say that because our town is struggling on the resources available to it. It's struggling as it is. We don't need this, maybe. Jesus, John, huh? There you are. Wow. Wow. 6.5 minutes to the top of the hour. Plenty more to get through. So let's carry on then. Let's carry on. But look, let's be honest. Let's agree with Adam Price from Plaid Cymru. Let's bring in this law retroactively or retrospectively. And as I said, let's convict Blair and hang him from his ankles in Belmarsh prison. Megxit. This bullshit, the Sussexes, leaving the UK. Good riddance to the parasites. I look at Harry Hewitt and Meghan Markle, and you know what I see? Scabies. I see scabies. I had scabies when I was younger. Oh, Jesus, it's terrible, isn't it, scabies? Do you remember scabies? Oh, between your fingers and everything, and you had to be bathed in that white emulsion type stuff. Do you remember that? Jesus Christ. I get nightmares even to this day, and I'm 45 with my big baldy head in me. I go to bed and I still think about it. Waterford Regional Hospital. I had scabies when I was younger, and they put me in a bath of burning stuff to kill the scabies, which is a little mite which gets under your skin. It's very creepy. Very awful. Very itchy. Scabies. They're parasites. Fuck them. Off to Canada you go and take a few more with you. Fit a plane with them. So, it's a good start getting rid of the two of them. A lot of racism talk around today. She, apparently, Meghan Markle, was the victim of racism, says everybody. And I had a giggle. I was listening to LBC Radio, Sheila Fogarty, and Sheila interviewed the academic Dr. John Price. Now, John Price ran an experiment. Wait till you hear this. Wait till you hear this. John monitored social media in the immediate 24 hours after the Sussexes announced that they were off ski. We're off, we're leaving, and we're stepping back from our royal duties. John Price, the academic, immediately jumped onto social media and began to monitor. And well, apparently it was vile stuff. It was filth, floor and filth. The Duchess took unbelievable abuse, apparently. You will first hear LBC presenter Sheila Fogarty, and then you will hear John Price, who ran the experiment.
Some of the things that you found online, I'll just trot through three, and I'll give a bit of a health warning to people in case any of them that they are offensive and they're attacking in nature. But just a health warning to those of you listening, on at least one of them anyway. Self-loathing race traitor was something that she was described as trailer trash, and Meghan, the Queen of Ireland, being an animal that I'm not going to say the sentence, but I think people can work out what animal that is in the context, and we've seen that.
This is how fucking crazy things have gone. Fogarty won't say the word monkey. Monkey, love, it's monkey. Monkey. Just keep saying, say it out loud, monkey. Repeat after me, monkey. We know that idiots refer to black people as monkeys. It's in the public domain, love. We're well aware of it. Just say the word.
Trailer trash. And Meghan, the Queen of Ireland, being an animal that I'm not going to say the sentence, but I think
somebody said she's the Queen of Monkey Island. Oh, I bet you she nearly died of embarrassment, Meghan Markle.
But I think people can work out what animal that is in the context, and we've seen that kind of.
Well, if people can work out what animal it is, why don't you fucking say it, love?
Related to that animal used in football, in racism in football and elsewhere.
She should have launched a postal competition right there. Answers on a postcard. If you know what word beginning with M, Meghan is the Queen of M Island. Answers on a postcard, please. We'll make a draw tomorrow, and the winner gets a weekend on Monkey Island.
Loads of others that you found as well. How did the stuff directed at Meghan Markle compare to other racist examples that you found online?
Wait till you hear John Price, this guy.
No. Well, I mean, I'll explain what we did. I'm involved in a project which is a combination of some journalism lecturers and computing specialists, and we're interested in tracking the levels of hate speech and abuse on social media. So we thought this was an interesting case to look at. What we've captured is a snapshot, a sample. So basically we looked at a period of around a day just after the initial announcement from Meghan and Harry. We captured tens of thousands of tweets which mentioned Meghan, overwhelmingly negative in sentiment, I think it's fair to say. But the stuff that we were most interested in were the most abusive tweets. So we captured, in that 24-hour period, we captured around 400 tweets which were abusive about Meghan and which contained what you would regard as some of the worst racist and misogynistic terms. And the ones you've kind of read out there are at the kind of lighter end of the spectrum.
Queen of Monkey Island was on the light end of the spectrum. Apparently, she was abused far worse than that.
Spectrum, it's fair to say.
So plenty of it was just unreadable from my perspective.
It was, yeah, and even for...
What do you mean unreadable? Why is it unreadable? How could anything be unreadable? No matter what it is, no matter how annoying or offensive or nasty it is, how could it be unreadable? What?
People like myself who kind of deal with this stuff on a regular basis, it's still, when you read through it and you actually read the content, it is still shocking to read. And I know some of my computing colleagues who aren't used to kind of dealing with this kind of stuff or get really upset when they actually read the kind of stuff that we're capturing.
Some of his computing colleagues, nerds, geeks, were a bit upset, apparently, when they read some of these comments. Give me a break. People who live online, they're exposed to everything. They're desensitised to everything. They couldn't give a shite, like. Queen of Monkey Island, she was called. Fucking hell. Right. That was Dr. John Price. Let's hear some more from him. Tell us more, John. And Sheila Fogarty.
So I think sometimes you become desensitised to it when you see it a lot, but I was still shocked.
Now, the internet and Twitter and online attacks are... I mean, sometimes newspapers put things out and they end up on the internet as well. So that can feed it. It can feed the whole thing, can't it? The whole sort of system, the whole ecosystem of racism.
Yeah, it's all connected, I think, yeah.
But most people with even... Actually, you don't even need a public role for this to happen to you on Twitter and elsewhere. There's something about it that's just full of bile and full of venom and hatred and jealousy and enmity and all of those things. Is it any different for her because of the scale of her position in British life?
Well, that's a good question, and I wouldn't have clear evidence. I mean, my sense is that if you're a high-profile person, probably the higher profile you are, the worse it is. It's bad. So, you know, we have lots of examples of female politicians who deal with this stuff on a daily basis. I'm sure.
I get it. I get it. I'm not on the same scale, I don't imagine, for a second, but
narcissistic radio presenters reign today in the UK's media. It's all about me. I get it. Nobody's ever fucking heard of Sheila Fogarty, a piss-poor average presenter on LBC Radio in London. I get it. Shut up, love. Shut up, for fuck's sake. You don't read it. Alex Ferguson was told by Sir Matt Busby back in the 1980s, long before social media. Ferguson was moping around at Old Trafford, moping, feeling sorry for himself. And he smelled the pipe of the late, great Sir Matt Busby, the man who rose from the ashes of Munich and built another fucking brilliant football team. And Sir Matt said to him, "What's up with you?" He said, "The abuse in the newspapers." And Matt said, "Why do you read them then, son? You don't know anything about these people, son. They're not your friends, son. They're not your family, son. How could they possibly hurt you, son? How could you be offended by what they say about you, son?" And Ferguson, his whole life changed. He said, "Jesus, you're right. The only opinions that matter to me are my wife, Kathy, my friends, you, Sir Matt, my peers. I couldn't give a shit now that you say that. Madness, this. Madness. Oh, the bile on social media. From who? From some fucker who lives in Azerbaijan? Who hides in his mother's bedroom on a computer? He's not got an ounce of courage in his body. He'd never say it to your face. He spends most of his time masturbating using his mother's fucking underwear. Useless. And he goes online and he calls you a monkey and he calls you this. And we're supposed to change society because of that. We're supposed to transform how we live because a couple of fucking idiots go on the internet and call people names. This is what it's about. I'm not in any way playing this down. If you come to me and you tell me that you're devastated by what people are saying to you on the internet, I'm going to tell you to your face you're a fucking retard. You dickhead. Who are these people? I don't know. Of course you don't. What are their names? I don't know. One guy is called Mr. Universe 2020. Is he? He's not even got the courage to use his own fucking name. And you're concerned about what he says about you. Do you know why? Why? Because you're a narcissist. You're mired in identity politics. It's easy to offend you. You're offended because he disagrees with your position and he's called you a retard or a fucking spaz or something, and you're calling it bile and you're calling it vicious. It isn't. It's nothing. And I speak from experience. Went through it last summer. Never seen anything like it. I laughed my way through it. Came out of the woodwork. I was #1 trend on Twitter for 36 hours. As they were coming after me, and it didn't fucking worry a hair on my head. I laughed. Because you know what matters to me? About a half a dozen people. Don't get me wrong now. Do you know whose opinions matter to me about me? About half a dozen people. I give them that power because I love them and they love me. I say, if you've got something to say to me that I don't want to hear, you better say it. Don't keep it to yourself. Those are the opinions. Everybody else, I couldn't give a rat's arse. Why would I? And they're using this bullshit. They've gotten everybody corralled now, kettled. The world is on Twitter. And now they can begin to program. And censor. And ban. Change the landscape. Introduce self-censorship. All because some nasty things were said about somebody by somebody whom they'd never met in their lives. When all you have to do is use the mute button. Jesus. Mute them. Then you never see their tweets ever again. If you want to go as far as blocking them, you never see them ever again. On Twitter. Hey? Listen to this madness.
Second, but
Yeah.
Oh, here we go. Here she actually has the answer.
Just don't engage with it.
I don't engage with it, exactly.
So I know that on a daily basis, when I do my job, there are people at home tweeting. I've muted them, most of them. But they tweet, and I set up my screen in front of me so that
they're listening to your radio show, and a lot of them think you're talking through your arse. Just like a lot of my listeners think I'm talking through my arse. And they say so on Twitter. Sometimes they're not very eloquent in the way in which they say it. Sometimes they're abusive. So what? Who cares? What difference does it make to me if I say something in a monologue and then I read on Twitter that some person calling me a big effing baldy C and all that? How could I possibly be hurt by that? Or offended by it?
not there, so I don't see what's being said, because it's vicious, absolutely vicious, and it's endless. It's not just directed at me, but it's
not vicious. It's not endless. It's only important if you pay attention to it. You teach children, hopefully if you've got children, you teach them that what others say about them is completely irrelevant. It doesn't matter. We were brought up in school to believe the old adage, sticks and stones, the old saying. It's a life lesson. What difference does it make what somebody says about you? You've only got to answer to yourself. You know who you are, what you are, your gifts. You know what's beautiful about you, and you know what it is you've got to work on, because none of us are perfect. How could you give that power to people? But that's what they're encouraging people to do, to give all your power away to anonymous trolls. And they're doing it because they want to transform the way we live and interact. And they're getting away with it. They're getting away with it, I think. Anyway, let's move on. I think we're going to be here till about 6:30. Jesus, I go on a bit, don't I? You go on a bit, you big loud-mouthed, vulgar bullshitter who knows nothing. There you are, you see. You can say what you want to me, I couldn't give a shite. Let's move on. Another tune, maybe, another tune? What do you reckon? Another tune? No? Tough shit, Paddy. We're going to have another tune. We're going to have some Lou Reed. This is Vicious. Yes! Speaking of vicious, this is for Sheila Fogarty, who gets vicious abuse. Lou Reed and Vicious on the Richie Allen Radio Show. 11 minutes past 6 it is. Welcome to the show if you're just joining me. It's just me and you today. Hey, listen, let's head on over there to FSN, because, I don't know, something big might have happened in the time that I was boring the shite out of you. Ollie Barrett at FSN, let's get the headlines.
From Feature Story News in London, I'm Ollie Barrett. Russia's parliament confirmed the country's new prime minister after the whole government resigned on Wednesday. Ministers from 5 countries that lost nationals when a Ukrainian plane was shot down over Tehran have gathered in London. French President Emmanuel Macron says he hopes a new trade agreement between China and the US won't cause new tensions between Washington and Brussels. 91 Ugandan girls who'd allegedly been trafficked from Uganda have been rescued in the Kenyan capital.
Thanks, Ollie. Appreciate that. The Richie Allen Radio Show broadcasts live on Fab Radio 2 in Manchester. We're on TuneIn Radio as well. Triggerwarning.tv, multiple other platforms. The website richieallen.co.uk, currently undergoing a bit of renovation. And we'll have a brand new website real soon. I'm looking forward to that. Thanks to Hayden Hewitt. Hayden Hewitt is brilliant, by the way. If you need a website designed, Hayden Hewitt will give you an ultimately professional job, and he will do it as good as any other website designer anywhere in the world for a lot less than you would expect to pay. He's a great guy. Consults along the way. Hayden Hewitt. The big show, Trigger Warning, tonight, 10 o'clock. Triggerwarning.tv, YouTube. Let's move on, God damn it. Let's move on. Thanks, Jason. Yeah, Sheila Fogarty used to be with Nicky Campbell on BBC Radio 5 Live. That's absolutely right. You're 100% right. Mark requests a Police song, Spirits in the Material World. Mark, I actually don't have that song to hand, but if you remind me early next week, my friend, I'll make a note of it if I can, but if I don't make a note of it, I'll dig it out for you, and I will give it a spin for you. All right? I don't mind that at all. I don't have it to hand. My music database, a lot of greatest hits albums by lots and lots of artists, from all genres. But that one is not on the police greatest hits that I have, so there you are. But I would have done it for you, pal, because I'm good like that. Let's quickly move on then. 13 and a half minutes past the hour. The Labour leadership contenders, Nandy, Long Bailey, Starmer, Phillips, Thornbury, they've all agreed to sit down with the BBC's Andrew Neil. There is a contest that is currently underway to find the next leader of the Labour Party after the disastrous election result of 2019, December 2019. So they've all agreed to sit down with the BBC's Andrew Neil. Jeremy Corbyn, he's going to be, going to the back benches. And the first person to sit down with BBC's Andrew Neil is Lisa Nandy, Wigan. So we'll hear just a little bit of her conversation with Andrew Neil. First up, anti-Semitism. Don't panic. Don't panic. Do you know anti-Semitism comes up so much, sadly, because it's been in the news so much. I'm well aware of this, that when we mention anti-Semitism, an alarm goes off for our listeners. When I say anti-Semitism, this happens. Don't be like that. Don't be like that. Don't be like that. We've got to talk about it. I'll keep it very brief. A woman who calls herself Rachel Swindon, but that's not her real name, is a Twitter celeb, allegedly. Tweets about the Labour Party, big supporter of Jeremy Corbyn, has quite a few Twitter followers. She was pissed off, Rachel Swindon, at the Board of Deputies of British Jews because they demanded that the candidates sign up to 10 pledges, which were ridiculous. And of course they all agreed. They all capitulated. Swindon sent the Board of Deputies some pledges of her own. And then, in a very cowardly way, deleted her tweet. She's a coward, Rachel Swindon. Vacuous, empty-headed, mainstream light coward. She sent a very, very good tweet to the BOD, Board of Deputies, saying, seeing as you're raising the Holocaust remembrance, the definitions of anti-Semitism and all of that, how about you pledge to condemn Israeli behaviour and all the rest of it? And then she rather cowardly, as I said, I'm going to repeat it, deleted the tweet. Pathetic. But anyway, Lisa Nandy was speaking to Andrew Neil, and he couldn't wait to bring this up. Here's the clip.
Will you commit as leader to implementing whatever the Commission recommends?
Yes.
So when it comes to someone like Rachel Cousins, a prominent online Labour activist who's tweeted calling the Board of Deputies of British Jews conservative backers and demanding that they disassociate themselves from that party and that they condemn all Israeli military atrocities in the West Bank, her words, is that anti-Semitic?
Before we hear her answer, which should be no, of course, how could what Andrew Neil described be anti-Semitic?
Demanding that they disassociate themselves from that party and that they condemn all Israeli military atrocities in the West Bank, her words, is that anti-Semitic?
Yes.
You pathetic fucker, Lisa Nandy. How could it be anti-Semitic to demand that a Zionist group like the Board of Deputies, which is an unashamedly unapologetic supporter of the illegitimate racist apartheid state of Israel, how could it be anti-Semitic to say, you've demanded that Labour do this, this, this and this, all right, we demand that you condemn illegal settlements, condemn the murder of innocent Palestinians. How could it be anti-Semitic? Lisa Nandy, cuckold.
It is. And we have
It's not.
We have a clear policy in the Labour Party that when anti-Semitism is alleged, or particularly where you've got clear examples of that in writing, we suspend and then we investigate.
So you would suspend her from the party?
Yeah, I would suspend her from
She would suspend her from the party, of course she would. Yes. Because Lisa has been snared by the UK's Zionist lobby, like all the rest of them. They then move on to nationalism. Labour got destroyed in its heartlands because it basically painted people who voted to leave the European Union as a bunch of thickos and xenophobes. No, it really did. That's what Labour was doing. If you voted to leave the European Union, it's because you're a bit of a bigot. Right? And it ignored the fact that because Labour has ignored working class people and working class people's problems for decades now, that other groups have come in the place of Labour and spoken directly to white working class people and told them what they need to hear. Labour was destroyed because of that. So nationalism comes up here. Listen to what she says, Lisa Nandy. She wants to be the leader of the Labour Party. It's unlikely, but it's interesting what she says about nationalism.
It's hard to see a route back for your party without a revival in Scotland. You've proposed setting up an international commission to look for historical examples of how nationalism has been beaten by social justice. What are you talking about?
You sound really confused by this.
I am.
I'm confused as well. She's talking about, she wants to bring out examples of how nationalism was beaten by social justice. Nandy thinks you can beat nationalism with social justice. What the fuck like?
I'm surprised because you surely must have been watching as socialists have been beaten over and over again by nationalists. And the idea that we have all the answers in the Labour Party, I'm sorry, there isn't a single person who believes that. I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that rather than turn inwards and argue about resources, we should look outwards to other countries and other parts of the world where they've had to deal with divisive nationalism.
Now, where should we look, Lisa, in the world to see how divisive nationalism can be dealt with? Her answer is jaw-dropping. Andrew Neil stitches her up like a kipper. Stitches her up like a kipper? He does her up like a kipper. She says, let's not look inward, let's look outward, and we can see examples of how nationalism is beaten. Divisive nationalism is taken on. Wait till you hear what she says. Oh, it's amazing.
And seek to discover the lessons from when, in those brief moments in history, in places like Catalonia and...
She didn't say Catalonia, did she? Where Catalans have had their fucking heads kicked in by the Guardia Civil in Barcelona and other areas. She's not seriously saying that we can look to Spain to see how to deal with divisive nationalism. Come on, really?
Nationalism, and seek to discover the lessons from when, in those brief moments in history, in places like Catalonia...
She said it again. Oh my God.
Catalonia and Quebec, we have managed to go and beat narrow, divisive nationalism.
Yeah, we've beaten them over the fucking head. We've seen videos of police officers jumping down stairs, launching themselves like Exocet missiles at men and women who are campaigning for independence for Catalonia. We've beaten it into them. Can you believe this faux socialist, this champagne socialist, this prole pretender uses Catalonia and the plight of the Catalan people as an example of how you can defeat divisive nationalism? I couldn't believe my ears either.
Social justice
tell you that they believe
Andrew Neil is good here.
their kind of nationalism, which isn't a hard right nationalism, their kind of nationalism goes hand in hand with social justice.
Well, I think it suits the Scottish nationalists, actually, to keep this argument...
She knows now, Nandy, that she's just completely fucking hung herself, so she takes it back to the Scottish referendum question.
This argument going about independence, because while the entire conversation in Scotland is focused on the Constitution, nobody's paying attention to their record, which is frankly appalling.
I'll tell you how to stop divisive nationalism. Beat the shit out of them. Beat the shit out of them.
I'm being very disingenuous here, I know that. I'm being a bit of an idiot here. I'm well aware of it. But, you know, I would say to her if I was Andrew Neil, so we need to get a bit of Antifa, do we? We need to get Antifa to start kicking some sense into the UK's nationalists. Do we, Lisa? Lisa Nandy. 22 and a half minutes past the hour. You couldn't make it up. You couldn't make it up, I tells you. We're going to finish with this very briefly. Back to the United States. Fox News presenter Tucker Carlson, he believes that CNN News has it in for Bernie Sanders. Can you feel the burn? No, neither can I. He's another faux socialist, another multi-millionaire prole pretender. He's a prole pretender, multi-millionaire Bernie Sanders. Another bullshitter. Anyway, Tucker Carlson is peeved that CNN seemingly wants rid of Sanders. But Tucker says they are inadvertently helping him. I'll explain why this interests me in a minute. Tucker Carlson last night. That's Wednesday night. Fox News. Here he is.
Now, at this point, as of right now, there's a strong chance that nominee will be Bernie Sanders. If that happens, if Sanders becomes the official leader of the Democratic Party, there will be chaos. The party's funders on Wall Street will recoil in terror at what's to come. They'll be joined in that terror by the establishment class in New York and Los Angeles, as well as by the entire intel and foreign policy bureaucracies in Washington. And all of these people demand to know one thing. How'd this happen? How did Bernie Sanders become the Democratic nominee? And that's a good question. Here's part of the answer. It all started last night at the Democratic debate in Des Moines, when CNN President Jeff Zucker decided to destroy the Sanders for President campaign. Now, Zucker poses as a television executive, but he operates like a political consultant. His latest client is the Democratic establishment, which has dispatched him to crush Bernie Sanders before he can take control of the party. So just before last night's debate, CNN ran a story claiming, without any proof at all, that Bernie Sanders had once told Elizabeth Warren that a woman could not be president. Sanders denied that charge vigorously, but the message was unmistakable and crystal clear. He's a sexist. Don't vote for him.
He's a sexist. Don't vote for him. And to be fair to Tucker Carlson, he provides some evidence to support his contention that CNN want to destroy Bernie Sanders.
CNN relentlessly hyped the allegations on air, and then once again during the debate. Watch how Zucker's hand-selected moderator framed the story.
Senator Sanders, I do want to be clear here. You're saying that you never told Senator Warren that a woman could not win the election.
That is correct.
Basic. She says to Sanders, this CNN woman, you're saying you never told Warren, Senator Warren, that a woman can't be president. That's correct, says Bernie Sanders. Listen to what the moderator says now. It's very funny.
Senator Warren, what did you think when Senator Sanders told you a woman could not win the election?
He just fucking told you he never said it. He's standing over there, love. Could you not hear him?
I disagreed.
Senator Warren, what did you think when Senator Sanders told you a woman could not win the election? Which he clearly did because he's old and hates women and also lies a lot. Just more journalism from our friends on cable news. Suddenly, in weed-scented apartments around Brooklyn and the Bay Area, legions of Bernie supporters understood for the very first time why Donald Trump is always attacking CNN. Why? Because CNN deserves it. And thousands of them reached for their credit cards in response. By this morning, the Sanders campaign was reporting its best ever fundraising on a debate day, with more than 100,000 individual donations. So it turns out it's possible to level attacks that are so stupid and so unfair that they wind up helping the person you're trying to hurt. That's a lesson CNN has repeatedly failed to learn in the Trump era, and they were no smarter this time.
But have they failed to learn it? You see, I find it fascinating that Tucker Carlson can't, I suppose, I don't mean comprehend, but he doesn't want to juggle the possibility that it's deliberate. It would never occur to Tucker that maybe Trump was wanted as president of the United States, and that the attacks on him by CNN were deliberately designed to mobilise people behind Trump. Tucker can't comprehend, maybe he can, he's a bright guy, Tucker, I'm not saying he isn't, maybe he can't comprehend that the establishment wants Sanders. They're not stupid, these people. Want Sanders not to be president, maybe, but to be the Democratic nominee, maybe. They're not stupid. They will know that that any perceived bias against Sanders is likely to motivate his base and maybe swing one or two people, or maybe more than one or two people who might have been indifferent about Sanders, who might now think, Jesus, they're going in hard on Bernie there. The same thing happened with Corbyn. The media went in very hard on Corbyn when he became leader of the Labour Party, and it mobilised people because people believed that Corbyn must be a threat to the establishment. Donald Trump supporters, because of CNN, not just CNN, but MSNBC and others, Trump supporters back in 2016 believed that the media coverage against Trump meant that Trump must be some sort of threat to the system. Which, of course, is bullshit. Trump is the system. I wonder why these guys don't consider the possibility that all of this is by design. Is it, Richie? I'm only speculating. It might not be the case. What the hell do I know? It's just an idea. It's 28 minutes past the hour. That's it. 90 minutes today. Thanks for listening to the Richie Allen Radio Show. I really appreciate it. I want you to have a brilliant weekend. Thanks to all my guests this week. We've had an interesting week again on the radio show. Have a lovely weekend. I'll be with you, of course, on Sunday morning at 11 a.m. UK time, where you and I will go through the UK Sunday newspapers. I'm closing out the programme with Cher. Bye now. Bye.